Live from the Event and Arena Marketing Conference in the heart of the Mile High City. Hello and welcome to Adventures in Venueland, an EVMC podcast. This is your all-access pass to go backstage and behind the scenes with some of the brightest minds across the scope of the live entertainment industry. I'm Dave Rettelberger.
And I'm Paul Hooper. We'll introduce you to some of our favorite people as we dive deep into the world of live touring shows and the venues that host them.
Today's adventure has us talking to a Colorado sports legend. He's played in venues from coast to coast, three-time Pro Bowler, former linebacker for the Colorado Buffaloes national championship team, 15 seasons in the NFL. We're talking the Seahawks, the Patriots, the Steelers, and he played right inside linebacker in Super Bowl 30. Since retiring as a player, he's worked as a color analyst and sideline reporter for college and NFL football on a variety of networks. Plus, I should mention, has his own business where he sells and ships non-venomous snakes. We'll find out more about that. Please give a warm EVMC welcome to our special guest today, Chad Brown. All right, let's start with this because before we get into all the history, you ship snakes.
Yes, I do ship snakes.
So tell me about this because you've got some snakes in your office. But how did you get into this as a thing?
Okay, as a kid, I was an animal person. I was quite shy, and I related more to animals than I did to people. So when I got out of my mom's house, because my mom said no snakes in her house.
No snakes in the house. Yeah, a lot of moms have that rule.
No snakes on planes, Samuel L. Jackson. No snakes in Marsha Brown's house.
Yeah.
So my freshman year at the University of Colorado, I met a friend in the dorms who had a snake for sale. Then trying to learn about that snake, I met a friend at a local pet store. We've ended up becoming lifelong friends. He and I have traveled the globe collecting snakes, and he kind of sparked that reptile passion for me. He was selling and breeding reptiles out of a spare bedroom in his house there in Boulder, Colorado. I thought, I can do that. As a scholarship athlete, you're now allowed to have a job during the year. So I used my...
Back in the day.
Back in the day, yes. Right. Now they can make as much money.
Pre-NIL.
Yes, good for
now
those
you
guys.
get sponsored by the snakes.
Yes. But I used that money every spring that I got selling my babies to local pet stores and students to, equip my apartment with a decent couch and a decent television. And that's where that passion for reptiles really got going at the University of Colorado.
So obviously this became quite a big business, and one of the things is you also didn't just do this as kind of like a hobby. You also really strove for advocacy for the animals, right? I mean, I know that was a big passion of yours as part of this. Doing it the right way.
Yes, there's an ethical way to do almost everything. And if you're going to sell a snake to somebody that's 18 inches long and it's going to be 18 feet, who's got a cage that houses an 18-foot animal? Right. Who has a supply of piglets to feed an 18-foot python?
Right.
So I made a decision a long time ago to sell what I thought were the most pet-appropriate species.
Yeah.
Because I want everybody to have a wonderful experience. Whether you're the animal or the keeper, both sides should be considered in that equation, and both sides should have a good time in that experience.
So it's pretty cool what you've done, and this. But let's also talk about your office because you do keep a couple snakes at the office, right? You were telling me.
I do have a few snakes at the office. I've got some green tree pythons, and I do a lot of radio shows around the television, around the country. And a radio show host in Portland, he would always ask me about my snakes, and I would talk to him about the green tree pythons. He said, well, let's come up with a contest where we can name these snakes. So it's one male and three females. So it became Jay-Z and Destiny's Child. So there's Beyonce, Kelly, and Michelle that are part of my green tree python.
Is one of the females slightly more successful than the other two?
One of the females she's spectacular.
Oh, well, there you go.
The other two are
the
nice.
queen, if you will.
The queen, yes,
yes,
exactly.
Of course.
All right. So what's it like to have your own Wikipedia page where they have your weight and height listed? Do you have to go on update after a big meal? Is it something where you when you have your own Wikipedia page, do you check your own Wikipedia page?
It turns out there's some folks who are very protective of their Wikipedia postings.
Yeah.
So my Wikipedia page was originally created by a fan in New England. And it was full of stuff that I really didn't think should have been on there. And it glossed over.
It's not always flattering.
Right. It glossed over some of the better things that I thought should have been on there. So it's been a steady, consistent fight between he and some folks I work with to try to get this page updated with things I think are flattering.
Sure.
For the best words, yeah.
That's great. You've played in a lot of venues, all across the country. So for this room especially, what makes a venue great or memorable for you?
Wow. Okay. Well, there's the childhood iconic venues. To be an NFL player and to play at Lambeau Field, obviously, is incredibly special.
Of course.
You grew up watching NFL films. You've seen Lambeau Field and all these NFL film videos. Now you get a chance to play there. And part of what makes that stadium great is you drive through a neighborhood to get there. So many stadiums are in corporate parks or they're an offshoot of downtown, but it's in an actual neighborhood. Fans are parking on people's lawns to get there. So that makes it special. I grew up in Southern California in the shadow of the Rose Bowl. And my high school, John Muir High School, go Mighty Mighty Mustangs, we play our crosstown rivals, the Pasadena Bulldogs, in the Rose Bowl in a game called the Turkey Tussle. So I have a older brother and sister who went to the same high school that I did. So looking at their yearbooks when I was a kid and getting to the pages about the Turkey Tussle, one day I'll get to play in the Rose Bowl. One day that's going to be me on that
Speak it into existence.
Yeah, so that day happened my sophomore year, my junior and senior year of high school, so I got a chance to play in the Rose Bowl. We did emerge victorious and beat those stinky Pasadena Bulldogs 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
The victory bell stayed in the A building at John Muir High School. So there's always these, different reasons. So there's the childhood reasons for Lambeau Field or the being a part of local history for the Rose Bowl for me. As a college broadcaster, to go to Bryant-Denny Stadium in Alabama with the statues of Nick Saban and Bear Bryant up front, that's another, kind of bucket list kind of thing. The big house in Michigan.
Sure.
There's just so many great, and of course I cannot ever forget the Folsom Field up in Boulder, where I played, my college football at, and run out behind Ralphie. So there's always these amazing connections to wherever I'm at, whether I'm working a game or I'm attending a game, that I really enjoy the venue because it becomes part of the history, it becomes part of the story. Where this amazing event happened may not be as amazing if it happens someplace else than right here. So I consider myself incredibly lucky to play in the Rose Bowl 3 times, to play in old Three Rivers Stadium where the Pittsburgh Steelers won all
some history there.
Those Lombardi trophies. I played in the old Kingdome in Seattle, and then now their new stadium. I heard you earlier when you said Seahawks. Yes. So yeah, the venue actually matters. It's a part of the story, and sometimes it's the lead of the story, and you don't want to ever bury the lead if you're in the news business.
And it sounds like it's more than just that bones in the structure, right? Like I noticed he asked you what makes a great venue. You didn't bring up anything to do with locker rooms. You brought up community. You brought up impact in the city, nostalgia, history. I mean, it really is like, how can you create this story around the venue? And that is really, can take it from just a good venue to this legendary venue that people are, whether you're broadcasting or playing, it's like it just draws you because you need to be there. You need to see what you're seeing on TV, and you see people rush the field. You're like, I've got to go and experience that, get a little taste of it.
Even here in Denver, with the talk of the new stadium being out there by the airport, I love where our stadium is because you drive past it if you're in the city frequently. So it becomes woven into the fabric of the city. And when a team has an incredible win, as the Broncos had 7-8 years ago, hopefully they get back to that. That connection makes the tie even deeper and stronger.
Totally.
So for a kid to drive by that stadium in the backseat of his parents' car and make a vow, one day I'm going to be in that stadium.
Yeah.
Right.
Those are the kind of things that I think NFL players, when we get a chance to play in stadiums around the league, almost all the guys have that type of experience, and they have that kind of childhood wonderment and wow, and now they're actually here.
Yeah. We had one of the guys from 21 Pilots in a high school tournament. He played in our arena because he was from Columbus, and he later could come back and headline. And those are big moments. And when you're part of the fabric of a community, that's such a key thing that gets thrown around a lot is being that organic feel and really being authentic, to use that word. But being part of that community, and when you're a venue, it's such an important piece. And when you played for a team, did you feel allegiance to that city?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, at this point in my life, I no longer root for anybody because none of those teams give me a paycheck anymore. I do root for the Colorado Buffaloes. I do root for the John Muir Mighty Mustangs. But yeah, you are a part. You want to, as a player, you want to ingratiate yourself into the city. You want to be part of the community from a sports standpoint, but also from a charity standpoint. What are you going to get behind? Well, how are you going to use your influence and your notoriety for raising money for a particular cause or whatever the case may be? And a lot of times those charity events are also held at that venue. So now you may get a chance to bring in some young kids into the venue, or maybe some kids with some special needs into the venue. So you're doing more than just playing and performing on game day. You're bringing the community into this venue, and they get to experience it as well, and they get to go out and spread the word how awesome and incredible it is.
You know, we talked, as I'm doing your intro, I'm going over highlight after highlight after highlight. But what it doesn't really show is there's a lot of hard days in there. There's a lot of hard work that goes into that.
I grew up in a very competitive neighborhood. And from my neighborhood where I grew up, the 4 blocks around there, I think there were 12 or 13 professional athletes come out of that neighborhood. I went to a high school, which I mentioned the name many times because I'm incredibly proud of it. Just from my era, there are 6 NFL players who played there. So hard work is just what we did. That was the expectation. That was how it. So I didn't think of myself as making some incredible sacrifice that no one else was doing, because this was what all my friends did. We all did these kind of things. I mentioned the Rose Bowl earlier, and anybody who's been to the Rose Bowl, it's kind of in a valley. There's mountains on both sides. My high school is about a mile away from the Rose Bowl. There's a street that was too steep for car traffic that they've actually blocked off, and we called it the Hill. And we would run from the school to the hill, and then we had to run this hill. And that
kind of like finding the way back here into the back of the convention center.
Exactly, or going up the stairs at Red Rocks.
Similar type of physical exertion, no doubt.
Yeah.
But running that hill became an iconic thing in the Pasadena area. If you're going to be an athlete there, you've got to be able to conquer this hill. And sometimes the hill conquered you. Sometimes you had to throw up after running the hill.
Right.
Sometimes coaches were, how many people can we make throw up today? So when you're raised in that environment, the sacrifice of getting up and getting your training done for the day, it doesn't seem like it's that much of a sacrifice.
It's neat to hear those days, and I can imagine the kid running up and down the hill, and you get to a big event like the Super Bowl, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going to, and I'll be honest, I didn't sleep well last night because I knew I had a couple sessions today that I had to do, right? And we've all had big events that, the night before, there's some little detail that you're stressed out about, and you wake up at 3 a.m, and you can do nothing about it except for let it cycle there in your head. When it's the night before a Super Bowl, how are you sleeping? How are you dealing with that? How are you able to manage that kind of stress?
Well, let's not just fast forward directly to the Super Bowl. Let's go to the very first preseason game. When you put on the official game day uniform, whatever team that you're going to be on, you're in that locker room and you're in the mirror and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, this shit is happening to me. I can't believe I am here. And then you go out and you screw something up, and the coach yells at you, go, yep, I'm here. This is really me. Now it was really me who messed that up. And so from that first preseason game, you played a couple of those, and you have your regular season game.
Yeah.
Then you have your first primetime game, Sunday night game, Monday night game. And you realize, oh my goodness, Mrs. Carter, my history teacher, she's probably going to be watching.
Right.
Luke Walker at Skywalker's Barbershop, he's going to be watching. Everybody in Pasadena is going to be watching. So that's its own anxiety moment.
Sure.
So, you step it up there, and then you actually get to the playoffs and you make a Super Bowl. And obviously, playing football from the time I was 7 years old, everyone's dream is to have that moment. I managed to get some sleep. My roommate was an incredible snorer. I played so long ago, NFL players still had roommates. That's how old I am. So his snore was very melodic, put me to sleep.
Yes, white noise.
I slept really well.
People pay for that now.
Thank you, John Jackson. I appreciate the white noise snore.
The white noise.
Put me to sleep. I woke up excited. I had played in the national championship game at the University of Colorado. At John Muir with the Mighty Mustangs. We won 32 games in a row. We won back-to-back championships in the state of California. So oddly, in my mind, it all made sense. I won Pop Warner championships. I won high school championships. I won a championship at the University of Colorado. Of course, I'm going to be in a Super Bowl. And of course, we're going to win this game. And of course, we didn't.
Yeah.
And of course, it hurt. And
Yeah.
of course, I cried. And I stood there at the edge of the field. Back then it was Sun Devil Stadium in Phoenix, Arizona, where the University of Arizona State plays right now. And I stood in the corner of the field, and I watched the stadium ops team bring out the podiums and the confetti cannons for the Cowboys. And I just watched. And I made that vow. I'm going to be back. I'm going to be back here next year. That vow that every athlete makes. I chased that thing for 10 more years. I eventually got on a Super Bowl team at the end of my career with the Patriots, and we lost that Super Bowl. So to be a 2-time Super Bowl loser sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terribly.
You made it to the big game, though. Let's not pretend that's not
it's
a big
cool.
deal, right? But a lot of people in this room, again, have had big events they put their heart and their soul into, and it just, for whatever reason, didn't work out. And you've got to go into work the next day, right? So what's that like? What did you take away from that loss that when you had to go back in and start the next time, how were you able to deal with that? What did you use?
Well, first you got to get over the bitterness. It took me almost 10 years to derive some pleasure from saying I played in the Super Bowl.
Damn right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because when you win the championship game and you go to the Super Bowl, there's not a single thought about losing. All your thoughts are about how awesome it's going to be and we're going to win.
Right.
And I gave you my history. Why would I lose? So that crushing defeat, it took me 10 years because in that 10 years, I said to people, I would have rather not gone at all than to go and lose.
Yeah.
So after 10 years of bitterness, I finally decided to let that one go.
Yeah.
And while afterwards, it certainly drove me to try to get back to that moment, to try to be on a Super Bowl team, to try to be the guy who can help his team actually win it, not just come close. But it's the pinnacle of, in some ways, of American sporting life. There is no more watched sporting event than the Super Bowl. There is no more scrutinized event than the Super Bowl. Having attended as a player and having attended as a fan, it's the most incredible sporting event in our country. And every year the NFL manages to outdo itself. So to be on the losing side of that, I don't think there's really an adequate way to describe the pain and crushing disappointment that comes with that.
Is there something this many years later, and obviously you said it was 10 years to get over it, but is there like a little sliver of a silver lining you can pull from it where you're like, it did, as much as of course you would have wanted to win, it did kind of, expose this adversity to you. You had to get through that. You got through that 10-year period. It's like, it's something where, the oversaid phrase, but, this sort of like pressure, this kind of, this tension of, when you do have this big disappointment and you get many, many, many years later and you're able to look back and say, maybe that's what made me a little bit of who I am and I got something out of that. Or if I'm with a friend or with a family member and they're going through something tough, maybe I'm able to relate to them a little bit better because I can kind of remember my own trauma or my own struggle that I went through. And, is there something you're able to kind of glean from that this many years later? Oh,
absolutely. Struggle is life.
Yeah.
It is the downs that make the ups so great. It is the losses that make the wins so satisfying. So to be able to have literally a complete football experience, to have the championships, but have the championship losses, to be on an undefeated team that ended up losing the Orange Bowl, but the next year coming back and winning the Orange Bowl based on the lessons from that, to be on a team that was a losing team, and to experience how awful that is, how awful that locker room is, how awful those post-game talks from the coaches are. I did Colorado Buffalo's radio for a while, and my experiences, taking those from my losing experiences and going and talking to those kids and being forced to do post-game interviews with kids who have just lost the third or fourth game in a row.
Rough.
How do you walk through those waters very lightly, but you want to be sensitive to those kids? And you listed some of my accolades, but I also, at the end of my career, was cut several times by the New England Patriots. So if someone were to talk to me, or I were to talk to somebody about my football experience, a kid who's going through a rough time, when I walk in the door, well, it's Chad Brown, NFL football player, you played 15 years. Well, I've been cut.
Yeah.
I've been disappointed.
Yeah.
I've been knocked down.
Fought through some injuries.
Yeah, I fought through some injuries. So if there's an emotion or feeling or a result that could come from this game, at some point, I have felt that and I've experienced that. So in the moment, no, you're not like, oh my goodness, thank you so much for this blessing of losing a Super Bowl. I can't believe I'm going to walk away with all these deep, profound feelings and future thinking lessons from this. You're hurt, you're crushed.
Sure.
But now, as a grown man, not that I wasn't grown then, but a much more grown man with a deeper perspective on things. While I'm not grateful, I am grateful that I've experienced all parts of this amazing game that we all love here in America.
Yeah.
So part of when things don't go your way is you got to hear about it from other people. Mm-hmm. And we've all experienced that too, where somebody's jawing at you, whether it's a family member or somebody you work with or somebody on from the other venue, the other team. How do you deal with critique when somebody come at you with something?
Most folks don't know football players are incredibly critiqued all the time.
Just a little bit.
All the time. So the film watching process is difficult.
Yeah.
Because there's only so many good things that a coach can point out. He's going to harp on all the bad things that you've done. So after every practice, you watch film. And it's up on the screen in your particular meeting room. And every coach has a red laser pointer. And while it's on the football player that's on the screen, sometimes it feels like it's burning a hole in your back while you're sitting there, because he may rewind that play 10 times, 20 times, and you get to see it over.
Let's look at your mistake.
Let's look at it again.
Yeah.
Let's have the whole
let's look
team
at this
look
dumb
at it
thing
together.
that Chad did.
Yeah.
And he may even turn to you and ask you that rhetorical question that every child hates when their parents ask, what were you thinking?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, clearly I wasn't thinking right. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done that dumb thing I just did. And so we're going to watch it over. We're going to watch it in slow motion. He may get 3 or 4 plays ahead and then go back all the way back to your play because it ties to the dumb thing that happened 3 or 4 plays later. So let's watch Chad again, and let's watch him do it again a second time, maybe even more dumb this time. So that critique process helps you develop a thick skin. But as we see now, athletes they have an avenue with social media to fire back on other teams, opposing coaches, opposing players, fans.
Are you glad you didn't have that though?
I'm glad I wasn't around in that environment, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe not I don't think I would have had the itchy Twitter fingers to fire back at somebody, but just the cameras and
the keyboard warriors.
Yeah.
You see these athletes that, all across the field that it's like sometimes rookies, they're coming in with these high expectations and it's just they get berated on social media because they're not perfect from day one, and it's pretty wild. I can't imagine the pressure that comes with that. And often they're teenagers. They're just out of high school or something.
Obviously, it's a very stressful job, and it's a performance-based job. But there's also a learning curve that I think the ownership, the front office, the coaches understand, but the fans have no patience. You were our #1 draft pick. You were brought here to bring us wins this year. You were brought here.
Sell a sponsorship.
You're a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
You have to be an all-pro in your first year. Yeah. So I do feel bad for some of these kids who are put into those situations because a lot of times they're still a great player, but they may not be in a great situation. They may not have great teammates around them. The coach may not be so good, and they suffer the brunt of all those bad things happening around them.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your path before. Let's take it way back. You're the kid running up that hill. At what point did you know that you wanted to make football your career?
I just wanted to play football as a kid because my neighborhood played football. All the kids in my neighborhood played football. Now, I was one of the younger kids, and looking back, I think that's where I developed some of my toughness, if I'm going to brag a little bit on myself. So playing with older kids, you couldn't whine or cry because they wouldn't let you play. And so there were certain kids who, when we would get together after school in the summer, don't tell Billy because Billy's going to cry. Chad, you can come. So that's how I learned to be tough and to be quiet and just just kind of do my job out there. But the thought of making football a career didn't happen until probably my junior year at the University of Colorado. In high school, my coach I had a really great coach, and he took my parents to Bob's Big Boy, once again, dating myself.
Yeah.
Those who remember Bob's Big Boy.
The hot fudge cake.
Probably the best a high school coach could, pay for with some parents.
Sure.
And said, if you take care of Chad's academic life and you make sure he's a good citizen, I'll take care of the football thing, and we'll be able to get him a scholarship. He didn't guarantee what level scholarship, but he's got enough talent. He can be a scholarship football player. So it was after my sophomore year at the University of Colorado where at that point, the draft process was just beginning to be publicized. Mel Kiper, who's now part of draft coverage every year, he was just starting to put out his draft Bible. And I saw my name in there, and I was maybe like the 65th linebacker in 2 years possibly to be drafted. And I thought, oh, I could actually do this. This is amazing.
So you're saying there's a chance.
There's a chance, yes. Someone's interested in me being an NFL football player. So from that moment to having a conversation with my coach that summer of, hey, I saw my name here. I'd like to get there. I want to be as good of a player as I can be for the Colorado Buffaloes, but I also would love to play in the NFL. Please help me do that.
So we talked for a minute about some of the hard stuff, the critiques, the feeling of losing the big game. But you won a big game, right? You part of the national championship team there for Colorado, and so what's that feeling like when you achieve that goal, and how do you keep your head in check?
Well, we lost the year before, so that was a very humbling moment. The year before, we were undefeated. We went into the Orange Bowl. But if you look at our record that year, look at the scores in particular, we won most games by at least 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 touchdowns. So we weren't tested. We weren't hardened. We were very good. We were very talented. We had great coaches. But we weren't hardened by our schedule. So the year that we won the national championship, the year that we won that Orange Bowl against Notre Dame, we started the season 1-1-1. 1 win, 1 loss, 1 tie. And that was that hardening, toughening moment. We had some player-only led meetings that guys made promises and vows to themselves. The rallying cry of don't forget what happened last year in that Orange Bowl went from just kind of a rallying cry to a heartfelt, I don't want to feel that again kind of moment. And so throughout the year, we reminded ourselves, and our coaches reminded us about how awful that feeling was the year before, how hardened we had become in beginning those first 3 games this season, being 1-1-1. So to be able to fight through all that adversity, that year, we won a national championship. Not only did we win a national championship, but we had the country's most difficult schedule. So it was an incredible gauntlet of teams to get through to get to where we got. So that moment was incredible because it wasn't just for that year. That whole momentum started the 2 years before that. So it was an accumulation of all that work finally paying off after 3 years of putting that team together. And to do it with your college teammates, it's different. In high school, when I won back-to-back championships, you don't live together. You go home to your mom and dad every day. Well, as a scholarship athlete, you tend to room with another scholarship athlete. All your friends are other football players. So this is not just the guys you play football with. Well, this is my roommate. Right. These are the guys who I go to study with.
Yeah.
So this is literally my brothers.
Yeah.
And, to speak a little further to that brotherhood, when I got married, 3 or 4 of my groomsmen were guys from my Colorado football team. So it is a brotherhood that is formed. And so to achieve that together with those guys has created a lifelong bond that is unbreakable. So whenever we get together, we certainly remember that championship moment and how awesome that was. But more often than not, we end up diving into, the jokes in the locker room and all that brotherhood kind of stuff.
What have you seen, having been on various teams at different levels? What do you think makes the best teams that you've been on? Is there a special chemistry? Is there something almost like unspoken? You just get the right people in the room and something happens? Or have you noticed any through lines of, like how people hold each other accountable or anything like that?
What is the secret sauce? Is that your question?
Yes,
the magic pill?
Right. Please, we all need that.
We'll keep it in this room. Yeah, exactly.
There isn't one. There isn't one. There's some very simple, true things for every successful team that I've been around. It's not the most talented team that is the best team. It is a team that plays for each other and plays together the best. And a great moment early on in my time in New England, they were just coming off of back-to-back Super Bowls. And it was my first year there. And it was actually my first mini camp in New England. And I was an older veteran, so I wasn't participating that day. So I was watching practice on the side, and Bill Belichick comes up to me and says, "What do you think about the team?" I was like, "Coach, I don't want to offend you, but I've been on teams that had way more talented guys." He's like, see, you don't get it. You don't get it. And right as he says that, Larry Izzo is jogging by. Larry Izzo is probably one of the greatest special teams players in NFL history. But as I look in the room, if I said Larry Izzo, does anybody recognize that name? No, they don't. So Larry Izzo was a core member of that Patriots team. And Larry, as an athlete, was probably a 7. So Bill Belichick says as Larry's jogging by, Larry's a 7 on the athletic scale. But he's a 7 every single day. Every day, every practice, every meeting, every game. He's always showing up with all that he has every game, every moment. So because of that, I can coach him and I can put him in positions to be successful. Whereas you've played on teams of guys who may have been a 9 athletically, but sometimes on a given play or a given situation, they were only a 2. So if it's a critical third down in the game, is he going to be a 9 or is he going to be a 2? I don't want that guy. I want the guy who's consistent, who's reliable, who I can count on in critical situations. If you watch an NFL game, for the most part, the game is going to come down and be somewhere between 3 and 5 plays, those critical moments. And if you got guys, even if they're only 7s that you can rely upon, chances are you'll win more games than not. But if you have these inconsistent guys who are occasionally flash and occasionally are awful, you don't know when that awful is going to come. And chances are it's going to come in one of those most critical moments, one of those 3 or 5 critical plays, and you're going to lose the ball game. So that kind of talent is not the be-all, the end-all. It's the cohesiveness, it's the consistency, it's putting in the work kind of thing.
Yeah. I love that answer, because I think a lot of us feel like we're 7s, but we can be consistent. All right, so talking Colorado football, yesterday we had a session on building your own brand, and perhaps there's nobody better at that than Deion Sanders. So just when you're looking at what he did for Colorado football, how do you feel about, because she's show business, right? He brought this national spotlight. Talk to me about your feelings and your thoughts on what he does, building his own brand and what he's doing for Colorado football.
Having been a part of the golden days for the Colorado Buffaloes, so this golden era of national championships and being a consistent top 10 team and got 4 or 5 guys drafted into the NFL every year, I was desperate for those times to come back. And he brought the national spotlight back to the Colorado Buffaloes. He brought national attention. Those first 3 or 4 weeks last season were amazing. But the football person inside of me knew that was a bit of a facade.
Yeah,
right.
So branding is one thing, but I think in the end, you can't brand your way to a winning football team.
Right.
You can get eyeballs, you can get attention, you can become radio talk show fodder, you can have ESPN College Game Day or Fox Big Noon Kickoff follow you around the country like you're the Beatles and they're the groupies kind of follow them around. But in the end, you got to produce wins and you got to be consistent with that. So obviously last year ended in incredible disappointment. And so now is the true test. You were able to get attention. You were able to bring in some higher level recruits, but now you have to win football games. And as I just talked about, it's not an accumulation of talent that wins you football games. It's the teams that play best together. So when I hear reports about guys being dismissed from their scholarships, and that was their first time meeting Deion Sanders, or Coach Prime as he likes to be referred to, that's incredibly disappointing for me, because I know that that's counter to winning football. You need to have a relationship with this coach. This coach needs to know every player on the team, because every player is important. Even if you're not going to play for me on Saturdays, or you're going to prepare the guys who are going to play. Therefore, I need to bring the best out of you so you can bring the best out of them. And that domino effect needs to happen.
And then when your moment arises, you've been going against the best, and it's made you better.
Iron sharpens iron, as the saying has been in so many locker rooms I've ever been around.
Sure.
So while I am stoked that the Buffaloes are part of the conversation, while I'm optimistic that things are going to turn around and have a winning record this year, there's no shortcutting that process. Yeah. Team building is team building, and it takes time, and it takes work, it takes effort, it takes work. And if you're going to bring in a band of mercenaries, recruits from other colleges and high schools, and they're not there to be Colorado Buffaloes, but to get some NIL dollars or to have their social media handle on the back of their jersey, that's not a team. That's an accumulation of talent, But as we just talked about, that doesn't win you football games. I need guys who are competitive, who are there, who are working hard, who are consistent, who are steady, who are reliable, who put in sustained effort and sustained greatness where that shows up on Sunday or Saturday. So I'm looking for that this season. I'm hopeful and optimistic about that.
Chad, one of the things that everybody in this room has had an experience with is that first day on the job when you're walking into a team that already exists and finding your spot on that team. You experienced that a few times as you changed teams, and even in your current career of broadcasting. But as you're changing teams and starting off at a new place, what did you find helped you make your way and become not just you and your success, but a part of the team?
There's a great lyric from Buju Banton, one of my favorite reggae singers.
You gonna sing it for us?
I won't.
Okay.
I won't try. And I'm pretty sure it's biblically based, but it's he who seeks knowledge begins with humbleness. So you're walking into a new situation. Now is not the time to brag about your past accolades. They brought you here to do something for them. It's great that you did those things in the past, but what can you do for us? How do you ingratiate yourself to people? The cocky person doesn't do that. The humble person does that. And so that ability to walk in seeking knowledge, humble to recognize that there's people who've been there far longer than you, who have more experience, may have be, cemented into leadership roles. So you have to navigate some waters and get a lay of the land kind of thing. I've prided myself at some point during my football playing career, I played every linebacker position that's ever been invented. Outside linebacker, inside linebacker. I've had my hand in the dirt rushing the quarterback. I've been on a two-point stance. I've been the guy who drops back into coverage. I've been the guy who rushes and tries to stop the run. From a football perspective, I played Sam, Buck, Jack, Will, all these different terms they give linebackers. Because I figured if a coach has a plan for me, well, I should try to execute that plan. I shouldn't walk in the door telling the coach what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, along the way, can I have a conversation with that coach and say, hey, I think I could really benefit us doing this or doing that? So yeah, humbling yourself to those moments I think is critical to becoming a part of a new team. And then understanding the culture there and what you are facing, what's either going to be against you or what do you need to quickly join into. Becoming a New England Patriot, obviously the culture there was the Patriot way. What is that? Working hard, being humble, eliminating distractions. Tom Brady, the greatest football player maybe of all time, he was maybe the leader of the Patriot way. So as soon as a new player came into that locker room, he went over and shook that player's hand. And as corny as it sounds, would say, hey, I'm Tom Brady. You got any questions about how it works around here, where the equipment guys are, who you should know?
But he would do
talk
that.
to me. Huh?
He would do that.
Tom Brady would do that with every new guy. Every new guy who came in, Tom Brady was that guy. So that leads itself to a great culture versus when I first got to Seattle. It was the first game in Seattle, the first home game, and we lost. And my wife was in the wives area talking to the other wives. And they are asking, oh, where are you guys going to go for dinner? What are you guys going to do after the game? Blah, 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 blah. And they go to my wife, and she says, well, Chad's going to want to go home. He hates losing. He doesn't want to go out to dinner. We just lost. And one of the wives says, we lose all the time here. This was before
It's just
things got
another
better.
Sunday.
There were some rough years. So things have since gotten better. But okay, so my wife tells me that in the car ride home, and I go, okay, I've got to become a force for changing the culture here. I was brought here not only to play linebacker on the football field, but to bring some of that Pittsburgh Steelers culture and success to this organization because we lose all the time is a terrible motto. It sucks as a motto.
Yeah.
Put that on a T-shirt.
Yes.
So you talk about coaching Coach Bill Belichick, right? He's got a reputation for being a tough guy, and I think we've all had a tough boss. What'd you do to succeed with him?
It's pretty simple with Bill. You have to be a dedicated football person. It was the most dedicated football environment I had ever been around. And so if you were going to be a part of that culture, if you were going to join the Patriot way, you had to be as dedicated as they were. And so often we've had bosses who demand dedication or a level of expectation from you that they fall short of themselves.
Sure.
Right.
And I had a coach in Seattle, who it rains, not Pete, it rains very frequently in Seattle. So you can see when someone has left the parking lot because the parking spot is dry, but everything around it's wet.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I was a veteran player, so I would spend time after practice getting in the hot tub and the cold tub and doing my weight workouts and spending time in the training room working on injuries. And I would watch tape. And I would walk by the weight room, and the weight room was right by the coaches' part, and I would see coach's car gone. I'm like, I'm still here and you're not here. And you tell me how invested you are, and you give us a hard time, but you're not putting in the work. It's very disappointing when that's the case, and eventually, things change there. Versus in New England, where by this point there were key cards, and so I was at the facility all the time. Sometimes early in the morning, sometimes late at night, on my off day, getting some work done, watching tape, whatever the case may have been. And there was one time in the 2.5 years I was part of the Patriots organization that Bill's car wasn't in the parking lot. And by the time I had finished getting my workout in and spent some time with the trainer and walked out to my car, his car was there. So he you know what I mean?
Came back.
He came back. So when someone is willing to put that much work in, then how can you not be willing to try to at least meet his standards? So the Patriot way of doing your job, what does that mean? Don't be a distraction. Work incredibly hard at your craft and buy into the whole team concept of what you're doing. This week, we may ask you to do this. Next week, it may be different. This week, you may play 60 plays. Next week, you may play 6 because this opponent doesn't match up so good for you as an individual player. So doing your job is not just an overall global thing. It's also very specific to what this week may bring. So that Patriot way of doing your job was often said around the facility, and sometimes guys would come back to the locker room on a Wednesday when we get the game plan. And I go, well, I guess it's a do your job week, and by that they meant they had some kind of demotion or they were going to play less plays, but they knew they still had to do their job. As crushingly disappointing as I was personally to be a part of this team, that was what was expected.
What was it like to make a career change? Because at some point, you're not signed again, and you've got to look at yourself and think, what am I going to do next? And I think a lot of us have been in that position where you're thinking, my whole life's going to head in a different direction. Broadcasting is really a natural fit for a lot of players, but what was that like for you?
As I said earlier, I grew up pretty shy. I had a stutter as a kid. So the goal wasn't to be on Monday Night Football. The goal was to somehow grow myself. So I could be public, I can be comfortable on a stage like this, so I could speak publicly. So no matter if you're a parent or a coach or a teacher or you're running the business, your ability to communicate with people is paramount. So to try to grow past my, some ways, self-imposed limitations, I thought this broadcasting it's going to be tough. It's going to be challenging, but hopefully it will bring something out of me that I believe, that I hope is in there somewhere deep down inside. Yeah. And I can, sorry for the graphic imagery, take that shy kid down to the basement and choke him out and keep him down in the basement. So that was a humbling experience because I didn't do that for 5 years after I played. I devoted myself to my reptile business, and then I decided, okay, let me try this broadcasting thing. So I was far enough removed as a former player where I didn't get just the instant, oh, come on in. So I had to slowly work my way up the ladder and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. Sometimes very difficult, hard to even stomach that I did those kind of mistakes. I didn't call anyone out of their name. I didn't curse on live air. But I did some broadcasting 101 mistakes that you shouldn't do. Luckily, I haven't repeated those.
You mentioned your wife. Mm-hmm. How'd you guys meet? Tell us a little bit about the home life.
Met at the University of Colorado. She had 2 rules. She didn't date athletes, and she hated reptiles.
Yeah.
So my game was clearly very strong. Clearly very strong to overcome those limitations or barriers she put up. We've got 2 kids. A daughter, 28, lives in Austin, Texas. She's a copywriter for Mara's Candy, actually getting married in September.
Oh, cool.
And then my son's out in Hollywood.
What's more stressful, a Super Bowl or planning a wedding for your daughter?
Ooh, advice to all future parents. Give a dollar figure, give them a spreadsheet, and walk away.
That's great.
You're not to exceed this dollar figure, so if you want a $10,000 tiara and $200 in flowers, that's on you. So I just want to have a great time and enjoy and embrace her incredible day. And I did not want to be that dad who is going to the bridal suite and going to the flower shop or going to the cake person and having this rolling calculator in my head. So one of the very first things was to give that dollar figure and walk away.
Yeah. All right. In just a moment, we're going to ask if anybody's got any questions. So think of anything that you want to ask. But I want to ask you, as a reporter, you're going into a venue. What can we do as venue people to make your job easier, so that when you're talking about your experience and you got to fill in a game that's maybe a little lopsided, that you got some nice things to say about the venue? Are there any things that really stand out that from experience from that side of things?
I'm not sure if there's any venue architects here. But the radio booths tend to be awful.
Yeah.
Television obviously gets preference, 50-yard line right there in the middle, and the radio booth is sometimes down on the end. So giving radio its due. There's still folks who listen to radio. There's folks around the world who are going to listen to this broadcast. And when you put us in a bad location, the broadcast suffers. If I can't see the other side of the field, well, now I'm forced to kind of make things up, and I can't be as descriptive. I can't do my job as well. So I've showed up with my boards, with all the teams on them. I've done my week of research. I've listened to the interviews. Depending on the radio or television broadcast, I've talked to the coaches and some players. So I've done my best to prepare. And then I get to the venue, and I'm like, this is awful. I did a game at a prominent, used to be Pac-12 university last year. And not only were we at the 10-yard line, but our suite was behind a booster suite. And that suite was pushed out in front of us. So I had to look through our glass, the side glass of the booster suite, then the front glass. So I looked through three panes of glass to try to call this game with the sun setting and all the reflections. So I would say just take a look at the boos you're giving the folks who are doing the broadcast and try to put yourselves in a broadcaster's shoes of, is this sight line good? Are there too many reflections? Does this give me access to the bathroom? Because broadcasters have to use the bathroom as well. So I've had to go up, an elevator, 3 flights of stairs, and halftime in college is pretty darn short. NFL halftimes are even shorter, so those runs to run back down can be really stressful because we're going to be back on air and there's no delaying that airtime.
Yeah, right.
So I would appreciate, if at all possible, some little bit of love and thought that goes into those booths. I did a game at the University of Oklahoma last year. Fantastic stadium. And they had some placards on the ground, cement placards, that were there for all the national championships. And so I was walking into the stadium, going to do my broadcast, with my head down, looking at these placards, because I was in my head trying to memorize some of these, because it was chances are there was going to be a pretty big win by Oklahoma, and I was going to need to talk about some other things during the broadcast. Yes, So I got my head down, and these placards were right underneath the light poles, but they had mounted some OU banners on these light poles right at my eye height. So as I'm walking and looking at this placard, I hit the banner pole with my eye. Next thing I know, I'm on the ground, blood's everywhere. They run me back to stadium triage, which I didn't even know there were stadium triage, first time seeing that. Got stitched up there at the stadium. So that was amazing. I'm really happy that there were folks who were able to give me some medical attention. But please eliminate all hazards around the stadium, if at all possible.
Stuff that's going to poke people in the eye, bad.
Keeping in mind that there's
particularly somebody who's going to broadcast and needs his eyes.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
All right. Do we have any questions? Yes.
We'll get.
Go ahead, Megan. Are you able to
Mike.
run this out that way?
What do you think of the portal and NIL now with all the changes and everything in college sports?
I think we have no one to blame but ourselves. We are the adults in the room, and we've created a situation where we deny these kids money who generate tremendous money for the university, for the schools, for the coaches. Everyone benefits back in my day except for me. There were kids walking around on campus wearing my jersey, and I didn't think of that as somehow taking dollars out of my pocket. It was a source of pride for me. But then once I got into the NFL and I would get those checks when somebody bought a jersey, you get a small portion of that, and every year the NFL would give you a check for that. I thought, that's not right. Someone's taking my name, image, and likeness, and they're making money. Nike's making money. The university's making money. The school bookstore's making money, but I don't get any dollars from that. So we've created a situation where there's no way for the NCAA or the universities, maybe not no way, but it's a very difficult path to create some legal barriers to this because there's no legal leg for them to stand on. So this could have been cut off before it got to the wild, wild west atmosphere that we have right now. To punish kids for wanting to change schools because the coach that recruited them left, or a new coach has come in and he's got other guys who he favors, I never thought that was right. The old rule was you had to sit out a year when you transferred. Now, the situation that we've gotten to now where kids can freely transfer and we have NIL, now every year, at the end of every year, every coach has to re-recruit his own roster. Yeah. And part of that re-recruiting process is how much money are you going to give me? Because I've been talking to USC and they're going to give me $200,000. So unless you come up with $215,000, coach, I'm gone. So now we're putting these kids in a situation where I can't blame them for chasing the dollars. I'm sure I would have as well, because we don't have any parameters and guidelines around this. So hopefully in the next couple of years, some well-intended folks can put some structure around this. Sure. To where it's not this atmosphere where it's just a wild, wild west every year, and you have as a college football fan, you have no idea who's going to be on your team next year. Is your quarterback going to leave for some other school? Is some other school going to offer your quarterback $1 million? The kid, it'd be crazy for him not to go and chase the dollars. So I don't blame the kids. I blame us as adults. And then we've also put these kids in a situation where part of the college experience is we're supposed to turn from kids into grown-ups. And part of that is the ups and downs of life. And I didn't show up on campus and immediately become a starter. I had to redshirt my first year. And then I had to earn my way onto the field. I can imagine in today's free transfer rules, somebody would have put a bug in my ear and said, hey man, you should come here because you can play right away. So rather than persevering through tough times, these kids never develop that, and they just hop from opportunity to opportunity without developing some mental toughness and some see-to-itness. So in the end, I'm happy the kids are getting some dollars because they're bringing in dollars, but I think there's got to be a lot more structure around it than what there is currently.
We have about 1 minute left. Paul, we have a question from the app.
Yes. Have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome? And if so, how have you dealt with that?
You can answer that in 1 minute, right?
Yeah. Not as a football player, but I would say as a broadcaster, particularly early on. My very first ESPN broadcast, they hand me the microphone, and rather than having EVMC on it, says ESPN. And they hand it to me, and I look down at it, and I can feel my throat tighten, and I can feel the sweat start dripping down my body. And we do the first rehearsal of the open where the two guys are in the booth, shoulder to shoulder, and we're at historic Tiger Stadium, and Memphis Tigers are going to be taking on the Tulane Green Wave. And we do the first rehearsal, and the very veteran play-by-play guy turns to me and says, you got to get control of yourself, man. You got to get control of yourself. I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I was that bad. But
that's fun.
So that was because I did not fully see myself as a broadcaster. I was kind of faking my way through it. I didn't have a level of comfort. I didn't have a level of belief in myself. So yeah, I think my first year and a half or 2 years as a broadcaster, I was just showing up every week and hoping I could survive and not drown. Versus now, I can show up and I think I can thrive in the same environments. But that imposter syndrome is definitely a real thing.
It can still hit even after years for all of us. Yeah, for sure. Hey, thank you so much for being a guest here today. If somebody wants to follow along with your adventures after this, are you on social media? Is there a good place to?
Yes, you can find
anything
me
you want to plug
on Twitter at ChadBrown94. And if you ever have any reptile, aquatic, bug, or plant shipping needs,
there you go.
You can go to All Pro Shipping, ship your reptiles, ship your aquatics, ship your inverts for bugs, or ship your flora for plants.
On that note, let's give a warm round of applause for our guest, Chad Brown. And thank you to everybody for listening to this episode of Adventures in Venueland. Remember, you can subscribe and find more episodes wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We do have your 5-star reviews so you can help others find us. Until the next adventure, I'm Dave Rettelberger.
And I'm Paul Huber. Thanks for joining us in Denver, everyone. Adventures in Venueland is a side project of the Event and Venue Marketing Conference, a marketing conference that brings together diversified event and venue professionals to cultivate education, collaboration, and innovation for the growing sports and live entertainment industry. Find out more at eventvenuemarketing.com.
Audio editing and mixing by Camille Faulkner.
Design and digital advertising by Megan Ebeck.
Copywriting and publicity by Samantha Marker.
Guest booking and brand strategies by Paul Huber.
Guest research by Dave Rettelberger.
Marketing strategies by Paul Hooper, Megan Ebeck, and Samantha Marker. Thanks for joining us. Until the next adventure.